and welcome to the DME podcast, brought to you by DME, the podcast booking platform. Whether you're a podcaster or an aspiring guest, the DME app is a perfect platform for you to get booked and manage your podcast bookings. I'm your host, Sukh Hayre, the founder of DME, and on this podcast we'll be discussing the latest news and views in tech, the ins and outs of entrepreneurship, and even dipping our toes into the adrenaline-filled world of mixed martial arts. Welcome back to the DME podcast. Apologies to our regular listeners for the short hiatus, but as great as podcasting is, sometimes we have to get a real job to pay the bills. But we're back with a banger, and today I'm joined by Samiksha Bhattacharjee, the host of Samiksha's State of the Debate, a writer, commentator, and student who is building a thoughtful platform around some of the biggest political, cultural, and economic questions affecting her generation. We talk about what it means to grow up as a Zoomer with the internet constantly in your hand, whether social media is making people more politically aware or simply more reactive, and why genuine debate can feel increasingly difficult, particularly on university campuses. We also get into free speech, digital ID, content creation, classical liberalism, and why long-form podcasts may be helping younger audiences think more deeply. It's a fascinating conversation with a very impressive young lady, so let's get into it. Samiksha Bhattacharjee, thank you for appearing on the DME podcast.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
All right. So I know I just practiced your surname and I've already butchered it, so I'm not going to try using that again. Apologies. No, but thank you for giving up your time. I know it's a warm Sunday evening and you probably got much better things to do with your time. So
No, it's always, I'm always willing to talk about the really interesting topics that you've put on the plate for today. I'm really interested to dive into them and talk about them with you.
Awesome. Right. I think, for the audience who may not know who you are, could you please give us a brief description of your kind of background and how you became kind of the voice of a generation?
Yeah, so I'm Samiksha Bhattacharjee, but I appreciate that a lot of people can't really pronounce that. So I'm Samiksha. I'm currently a student, but outside of studying barely, what I also do is talk about liberty and freedom, especially when it comes to my generation, which is Zoomers, and also just talking about the economic, political, and cultural issues that we're facing. And there's a whole multitude of problems that my generation are facing, and not enough people who are actually speaking out and giving common sense solutions, because a lot of my generation most of them are leftists, and I think that it's important to be able to balance that discourse with a voice of, I would say, common sense. So I'm a podcaster, kind of. I also am a social commentator, so I'm a freelance journalist, and I'm also an author and currently working on my second novel.
Okay, I'm sorry, how old are you again?
I'm a current student.
Right, okay, so you've packed a whole lot of life into, I'm guessing, half of my years on this planet, so very impressive. Awesome, right, so first and foremost, you're going to have to explain something to me. I'm of a different generation. I never quite learned what the generation alphabet was and what Zoomers are versus what Gen Z is, and I don't know what I am, to be honest. So there's a few things that I'm kind of hearing online discourse and the many podcasts I listen to. One is the pill colours. I'm not sure white pill versus blue pill versus black pill, red pill. Never be bothered to learn that, and neither do the generations. They always confuse me as well. So I'm kind of born in the 80s, so that's how I reference things. I'm born in the 80s and the 90s.
So born in the 80s, I mean, you would probably be Gen X. So okay. It's quite an irrelevant generation. You might be a millennial, but I don't mean that to be like in a bad way. You know, being irrelevant can actually be a good thing, because you aren't drawing too much attention to yourself as a generation, and there aren't that many problems. And I think that the reason why people are talking about millennials and Zoomers, so Zoomers are the generation born between 1997 and 2010, some say 2012. That age range. So basically people between around 14 up until 29-ish would be your Zoomer age range. So a lot of the time people, when they talk about Zoomers, are talking about the negatives. They're complaining about them, and they're complaining about how, well, it's either Zoomers complaining about how life turns out for them, which is, quite negative, or it's other people complaining about Zoomers having it so easy, or, being a total nuisance. But I actually think that, Zoomers are actually one of the most politically engaged and aware generations, the generation that I'm part of. And I think that can be a blessing, but it can also simultaneously be a curse. Because obviously we have the internet in our hands all the time. I grew up with smart TVs and with smartphones in my hand. And I know that that's not something that you had to face when you were growing up. So I always had access to basically unlimited information, as much information as the human mind is aware of. And at times it does feel like quite a lot of information, and it's hard to process all of these things at once. And so Zoomers have had to grow up with information overload, and quite a lot of that information is political information. And so you're aware of all of these things that generations before you weren't aware of growing up. And you've had to make up your own mind about where you stand on these issues, especially given that you're always being questioned about these issues because of how politically aware your peers are at the same time.
So it's really interesting, because thinking back to kind of when I was your age, or in that Zoomer age bracket. You're right. There wasn't the world access to the world's knowledge at your fingertips. The only thing you had was 4 TV channels. Yeah, there was only 4 TV channels. See, I'm just showing my age. I'm sorry. Yeah, it was 4 TV channels, and politics was something that kind of came on the news, which you were forced to watch by your kind of drunken dad, just when he's complaining about that you're not paying attention to the world and too busy playing football or whatever it was. But I'm just thinking back, the time I became aware of kind of politics and social issues is when I kind of did an A-level sociology. A-level? No, A-level sociology?
Yeah.
A-level sociology, basically. I kind of learned the various different sociological schools of thought. And being a natural rebel and contrarian, I think first time I learned of Marxism, I thought, yep, that's it. I'm one of the downtrodden. That's the one for me. It's all these rich people taking everything. And I think that hasn't really changed from what I understand. And I kind of see your generation through my own children's eyes, who are kind of a little bit younger than you, teenagers, but they are becoming aware and they are becoming exposed to kind of political talking points a lot more than I was at their age. But what do you think is the driving force behind that, in terms of, is it just being exposed to the internet, or is it even mainstream media, if you like? Are they pushing politics on the younger generation a lot more?
Yeah, so I think it's multifaceted, right? I mean, we are the most exposed generation in history to information, but the exposure is not the same as being politically literate. So we've got these algorithms, we've got social media, which is feeding us this non-stop stream of what is essentially dopamine-driven outrage and tribal boxes. So the way that the algorithm works is it's trying to get engagement. So creators are basically only publishing and creating content that is going to give some kind of emotional outrage, whether that's outrage or whether that's positive dopamine. So true engagement with politics actually requires a genuine curiosity, rather than the algorithm kind of force feeding you content. But that's something that social media does do. And another thing with social media is that it's basically meant that if you change your mind, if you're questioning the group consensus, it feels like complete betrayal to your online tribe. So everybody can see your thoughts in real time changing as they go through your social media feeds, because you have this whole history behind you of your old photos, but also your old opinions and your old thoughts. And people can track, if they go on your Facebook, they can track how you thought 10 years ago, and they can pull up those comments and those tweets or whatever, and they can, push that back onto you. And so, you have this whole history of your political thought kind of permanently enshrined on the internet. And so people are scared to change their mind publicly. Saying, I don't know, is completely dead online, because going viral, it rewards a performance culture. And so the content that Zoomers are engaging with online is a performance-driven outrage culture rather than genuine, actual intellectual curiosity in politics. And so, yeah, I mean, social media is definitely one of the things that is making Gen Z or Zoomers politically engaged, but you have to question the level of political engagement and whether that's actually genuinely curiosity driven or algorithm driven. But I do think that offline, we don't talk about this enough, but it's also just throughout history, how we've become completely detached from the intellectual roots of the past. And I'll expand on that. So a lot of people say that the West is a cut flower. So it's blooming, but the roots have been completely detached. And what that means is that people have all of these values, for example, I don't know, the rule of law or equality or whatever, but they can't remember where those values actually came from. And so they're looking constantly for where the source of those values actually are. And that's how, intellectuals like Marx, for example, in your sociology classes, are able to come and fill that void that God previously in the past would fill. But we don't have God anymore in this secular world. And so these intellectuals are able to come in and provide some kind of an intellectual blanket to fill that void. And so people can latch onto these ideas. And this is driven by the internet, but also through offline protest culture. We saw, especially in I think this kind of fueled, especially in the 1900s, but also obviously in the 2010s and the 2020s, with protest culture kind of exploding with Black Lives Matter, for example, in 2020. So because they're able to kind of boil down intellectual thought to slogans. So you have Black Lives Matter. That is just 3 words that represent so much, but doesn't actually, a lot of people don't actually get what the actual significance behind those words actually mean, because it's all protest culture, it's all outrage culture, and it's all performative. So we're seeing it offline when it comes to protest, and we're also seeing it online when it comes to the internet. So I think that the interplay of those things means that Zoomers are politically engaged, but they're not actually intellectually curious, which I think is a problem.
Okay, that's really interesting. So would you say that generation is engaged with politics per se, i.e. party politics, or are they engaged with issues that become political?
I think that if you look at the actual statistics of party membership, I think it's like less than 1% of the UK is actually part of a political party, whereas in the 1950s that was significantly higher. I think it was like 30%-ish. Don't quote me on those figures, but it was definitely significantly higher, in the double digits. And so we're seeing a disengagement across the board, not only with Zoomers and young people, with party politics. So I think that we're obviously seeing a rise in anti-establishment parties. We're seeing Reform UK, we're seeing Restore Britain on the right. We're also seeing the Green Party, and we're seeing Your Party, which has kind of fallen flat, but it's still there, on the left. And people are engaging with those parties, but they're not engaging with those parties because they want to be engaged with a political party. They're engaging with the ideas, and they want to push their ideas, and they think that doing it through a political party would actually mainstream those ideas. But when it comes to actually debating and discussing, they're not going to be talking about the actual political party. They're going to be talking about socialism or nationalism, for example. And they're just using the political parties as a vehicle to mainstream those ideas. But I think that a lot of my generation have actually completely clocked off from party politics, definitely from the Labour and Conservative Party. Those two parties are have completely fallen flat when it comes to young people. And I think that anti-establishment parties are definitely rising because they're there to fill that vacuum, but they haven't filled that vacuum to a point that um, young people feel completely engaged with party politics again as it was in the past.
Okay, so I know you have your own State of the Debate channel. Are the Zoomer generation having those debates? I know you mentioned that there was a lack of intellectual curiosity there, but are they actually having the debates around what's deep lying behind these issues that they're sloganizing or going on street protests about?
Yeah, so when it comes to that, I think that a lot of people don't actually understand where their opinions have actually come from, because they see slogans on a screen or in protest and they think, oh, that sounds cool, that sounds nice, let's just go with that. And I think that really comes across when you actually question the people. So for example, I've done like abortion debates, for example. So I'm a pro-life, I'm pro-life, and then when I question the people on, okay, well, I'm pro-life, so I know where I came because I've actually intellectually thought about this, but why are you pro-choice? Why do you believe that abortion should be a right? And they would come back with just slogans. They would come back with "my body, my choice," "fetus is a clump of cells." It's the same 5-6 arguments recycled over and over and over again, and there's no actual intellectual depth behind those arguments because they fall flat within a couple of seconds, and then they recycle and bring up another talking point again. So that kind of just shows that, I mean, abortion is just one example, but this comes across with a whole stack of ideas, because people haven't actually sat down and thought about where their ideas have come from. So yes, I mean, we are having those debates, and I think that the tabletop debate format that Charlie Kirk especially championed in America, campus debates, of which I've done quite a few, has actually meant that people are able to engage in intellectual debate, but a lot of the time people want to shut down debate, which is quite unfortunate, and we saw that with Charlie Kirk.
So have you? I've seen lots of that content. A lot of it originates from the States, but I have seen replicas of that happening within UK campuses as well.
Yeah, so I'm involved with those. Yeah.
Okay. And what's been the reception of those? Firstly, are they difficult to set up? What are the actual universities like when you kind of? I don't know. I'm not quite sure how you actually do it. Whether you do a formal setting where you stick a table outside and invite people to come and talk to you, but what's the kind of reception like? Firstly, from kind of the university admin departments and allowing facilitating those conversations, and secondly, from your fellow students as well.
Yeah, so you can't really do it on the actual university campus grounds itself. Having debates on actual university grounds is incredibly difficult. You'd have to do it through a society. So I'm the president of, I go University College London. So I'm the president of the Libertarian Society there. And so I've hosted debates in that capacity, which have been met with protests, and we've had to have close protection officers because we've received threats, rape threats, etc., just for hosting a debate, which shows what the culture is like in universities amongst students, but also amongst the admin and amongst the sabbatical officers, who are the elected student representatives of the student union, who don't offer any kind of support for students who want to facilitate debate, but actually to support the students who are offended by the fact that a debate is occurring on the campus. So yeah, I mean, we're seeing that's when it comes to actual society debates. When it comes to the table debates, the campus style table debates, those are basically just sticking a table on the pavement and inviting people to come talk to you. And the reception is quite mixed when it comes to that. A lot of the people who actually come and talk to you aren't actually students. A lot of them are just members of the general public, because a lot of students are conditioned to think that, you're kind of gonna what's it called? Frame the debate in such a way that they would be seen as, outraged, and to be seen as clickbait content, for example. So that's a worry with a lot of people, a lot of students. But also, even if off camera, and I've had these debates and discussions off camera, a lot of students, they, as soon as they find out that you're right wing, they click off. So, and especially as somebody who doesn't fit your usual profile of somebody who's right wing and who holds these views, they do automatically assume what kind of views I would hold. And then when I don't hold those views, they seem to be quite shocked, and they patronize me, and they say, oh, you must be doing this in order to get attention from white men, which is something I get quite a lot, which isn't the case. And so, yeah, I mean, they just can't fathom the fact that somebody outside of a white 70-year-old boomer male is going to hold the same opinions that I do. But it is the case, and young people are waking up.
So I can see that going on in terms of, they call it cancel culture, or kind of the repression of free speech. Is that taking a turn, do you think, at all in the last 6 to maybe since kind of President Trump's second term? I get the feeling you hear more of it, that's starting to take a turn, and I'm not sure if you've kind of seen that on the ground at all.
Yeah, I think that the online space has moved on a lot quicker than people have in real life. So I think that obviously universities are a bubble. They're definitely a bubble, and people are certainly more, well, they call themselves progressive. I don't think there's particularly anything progressive about cancelling people you don't agree with. But yeah, so universities definitely have been forced by the law. So in the UK, we have the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act 2023, which is the reason why a lot of the events that I host can't legally be shut down, despite them saying, unfortunately, this event has to go ahead because legally we aren't able to shut it down. So the law is one part of it, but I don't think that the law can be the only part of it. I think you need to change and shift the culture fundamentally. And so when it comes to students, that culture shift hasn't necessarily come yet. But when you look online and you see, for example, I'll just give the example of Sydney Sweeney and her jeans. If you saw that advertised, and the fact that, oh, Sydney Sweeney's got great genes was perceived by some on the left to be some kind of eugenics advertise, and she wasn't immediately cancelled, and that was just phenomenal, really. If you look at what peak woke, which is 2020, looked like, and you're seeing the reaction in 2026, it's really, I think it shows that people have basically they've got fed up. They've looked and they've seen how life was like in 2020, when you were all walking on eggshells essentially before you were saying anything, because it just felt you felt like you could be cancelled at any moment. But now it's fundamentally shift, and I think it's a shift for the good.
Yeah, I definitely echo that. I think the big tell was Elon Musk buying Twitter and now turning it into X. I think in previous years, you'd see people get banned from one platform, and then even if they'd built a profile up, they'd be terrified of getting banned from all of them, which would often happen. Because obviously people have staked their livelihoods on that. But as long as now that they have at least one outlet, it's shifted I don't want to use a cliche term, but the Overton window slightly, in that people have even the big corporations, the big tech corporations, are a lot more lenient now with content than there would have been even 2, 3, 4 years ago. So yeah, I think there is definitely a shift. But shifting on to, you mentioned that you're more of a libertarian now, or you're more libertarian aligned. I think I didn't find libertarianism until my 30s. Well, maybe in my 20s when I started paying taxes and I realised I don't like this, and the Marxism quickly went out the window.
Yes, that usually tends to happen.
What drew you to libertarianism as a philosophy?
Well, I mean, originally, I've always been economically on the right. During COVID, I did definitely have a turn towards woke ideology, just socially. I definitely did buy into the peak wokeism, as people call it. But economically, I mean, it's never really made much sense to me, because I look at the way that politicians behave. And obviously, we've had this complete carousel merry-go-round of politicians as I was growing up. So I've lived through, I don't even know, like eight prime ministers. I'm not even quite sure how many prime ministers, but I've lived through quite a lot for my age. And, you know, I've seen scandal after scandal. And when you see politicians acting like that, and then the economic philosophies that they teach you is that we should give the state more power over your economic life, and you should assume that, you know, the government knows best when it comes to how you want to spend your money. Well, that made no sense to me, because these politicians seemed like they couldn't manage their own lives, let alone the lives of all 70 million people in the UK, for example. And obviously, looking at, I mean, I grew up in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, and just seeing kind of government mismanagement over and over again when it came to the economy. And, you know, I grew up in that space, and I obviously always felt, obviously my peers were always saying, you know, socialism is the answer, but I would never I would never find the appeal in that. And I think that the turning point really for me was after lockdown, because, you know, lockdown was this mass authoritarian measure that meant that the government exercised such huge control over our individual liberty and over our movement. And we saw the reaction to that, which was basically non-existent, because everybody complied. And, you know, we all kind of moved on, and Boris Johnson said, okay, this is the end now, or Rishi Sunak, or whoever it was, said this is the end now, and we all moved on with our lives. And it was just seeing the permanent amnesia of lockdown, because nobody talks about it anymore. It's been 6 years. Everyone's forgotten about it, despite it having such a huge cultural impact and economic impact on all of us. So after all of that, I actually, in my school, because I was in school at that time, so the think tank, the Institute of Economic Affairs, which is a libertarian think tank, the oldest libertarian think tank in the UK. So they did this conference, and this economics teacher, who I was interested in, who I said that I was interested in economics, and she said, you should go to this conference. So I went to this conference, and one of the guys who I know now was talking about, you know, the green belt and about taxes and about housing policy. And the more I heard about this, I was saying, this makes so much sense. And I can finally see kind of the ideas that I've kind of come about in my daily life, and actually can see it in an ideology, and can actually see it, you know, see this expert talking about it. So I'm thinking, okay, so I'm not just dumb. An actual expert does actually believe the same things that I believe in. And, you know, that's actually how I initially got into it, you know, through think tanks and through meeting these people who have these similar ideas and being able to actually flesh out my ideas. And so I've continued that. I wouldn't describe myself as a libertarian. I would say classical liberal, but they're basically synonymous. Um, so yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm now a classical liberal.
Awesome. No, I think, yeah, I'm very familiar with the Institute of Economic Affairs. I don't think I discovered them until I was in my 30s or so. My my evolution was a lot more delayed than yours was. So I think you'll smash it. But on the kind of the DME platform, we'd like to focus on kind of tech a little bit as well, and obviously content creation, being the podcast debate and podcast space. And obviously you've kind of built up your own social media channels, and you've the host of the State of the Debate. What's it like being a content creator as well as a full-time student and engaging in kind of public debates? It must be a lot of time and effort and work there. I know lots of people I know of your generation love to do the short reels and the TikTok videos, etc., etc. I'm just basing that off my own kids more than anything. But you obviously take a bit more of a serious stance on it and kind of producing very well researched videos and online content and writing as well. How much of a priority is that for you during your current stage in life?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's all about balancing, really, at the end of the day, and what you actually prioritize. If you want to prioritize your education, then, you should 100% do that. And I think that what I've really been blessed with is the fact that I'm actually studying the same things that I talk about. Well, not really, because I don't think university has actually taught me a lot of the things that I talk about, but I can, the things that I'm writing about and speaking about and talking about is the same things that I'm meant to be studying. And so I think that I've been blessed in that sense. And, when I've actually, when I'm making the content, when I'm researching, then I'm able to, balance my time in that way. When it comes to short form content, I think that, yeah, you're completely right when it comes to my generation, are definitely into that. And I'm trying to get more into short form content purely because that's the way that you're able to reach a Zoomer audience. But long form content is actually increasingly popular as well, especially when it comes to the podcast format, because a lot of my generation, when they're traveling, when they're commuting, when they're going to university or work, or they're sitting at home, the radio isn't as popular anymore, but podcasts are, which I find really, really interesting. And I think it comes back again to the fact that a lot of my generation aren't intellectually curious, but I think that they're starting to realize that their ideas don't actually hold much weight. And so they're trying to listen to these experts and they're trying to listen to other people in order to inform their ideas a bit better, a bit similar to how, I used to go to these conferences and hear these experts speaking, rather than actually going in person. Now you can do all of that online. So yeah, I mean, now my generation are definitely listening to more podcasts.
That's great. I mean, you mentioned at the start around the social media algorithms. How much of something we don't make content just to view it ourselves and be the only have one listener? So, how much of a thought process is it to kind of adopt your content to kind of get the most possible engagement? Is that versus being kind of true to your own message and being true to the opinions that you want to share?
Yeah, so I've really tried to just stay authentic when it comes to the content that I'm sharing and trying to present it in the most authentic way possible rather than kind of clickbait content, for example, because I do want my views and my opinions to be forefront and not to be misrepresented, which I think a lot of creators do fall into that trap of clickbait content. And I think it's important to combine, when it comes to the algorithm, evergreen content, but also trending content that would fit in with the news cycle, depending on whatever you're talking about. So, for example, when it comes to my niche, What I would be talking about is the social media ban for under 16s, for example. That's something that's trending and people are talking about it. But at the same time, I'd be making a more generic video about, I don't know, why socialism has failed, for example, which is more of an evergreen content. So I think having that combination of both of them is important.
Sorry, I didn't know you had this on the agenda, but it's a good point you raise here. So we've seen a lot of censorship measures from this current government, and to be fair, or previous governments as well, really. I think you mentioned about the social media ban for under 16s, but we've also got, I think, some new YouTube.
Yes.
I think our government are going after YouTube and their guidelines as well in terms of preferential content. What do you think the motivation behind that is, and do you think it will succeed?
Well, actually, I think that there's a lot of motivation behind this when it comes to the government's POV, because number one, the social media ban is definitely, most certainly, a way to push digital ID, compulsory digital ID, onto all of us, which is just a means for more increased control when it comes to the government, because this is not about children's safety. If the government did care about children's safety, they would be controlling the border, and they would be ensuring that children are equipped with the skills to not always feel offended. But that's certainly not the case. We've seen in Australia, the vast majority of under 16s still do access social media. So this is not about the children. This is about digital ID being pushed. But simultaneously, the government is also giving votes to 16 and 17-year-olds whilst also giving them a curfew. So how I see it is a 16-year-old is able to vote, but they aren't able to stay up to watch the election results on YouTube because they'll be banned. So that's just so it seems ironic, but actually I think that something a lot more sinister is at play here. Because, I mean, I went undercover to a National Education Union conference in conjunction with Stand Up to Racism, and they were plotting ways on how they can circumvent the fact that you're meant to be politically neutral in classrooms, and they were discussing how they can push their leftist agenda onto children in classrooms. And so pairing that with the fact that children are going to be unable to access social media and access alternative viewpoints from the ones that they're presented in the classroom, because social media to me was this lifeline when it came to escaping the leftist echo chamber in my classrooms. So they're going to be cut off from that. The only views that they're going to be presented with are the ones in the classroom, and then they're going to be handed the vote at 16, and we all know who they're going to vote for there. So, I mean, I don't mean to sound like a conspiracy theorist here, but it does seem like the dots are all connecting.
Don't worry, you're in good company when it comes to conspiracy theories. I will I'll indulge in any of them. But no, I think that let me play devil's advocate a little bit when it comes to digital ID. So I'm in two minds a little bit on digital ID. From a libertarian, free market, anarchist perspective, I'm like, absolutely not. It's a Chinese-style credit control system, etc., etc. But then the practical, logical side of me thinks it would solve a hell of a lot of daily problems. So if we think of when we've got God knows how many millions of people living in the country illegally over the last 5 years, but they all have to engage with the system at some point. And without a digital ID, how do you tell those people apart? So if I'm an illegal immigrant, for example, and I go into a hospital, I can give any old name, I can give it, and I can get a service, whether it's a medical service, whatever it may be. I can create some letter-headed paper with a name and address on it, and I can probably walk into let's call them the dole office. I don't know what they call them, work and pensions department or whatever it may be, and probably get some form of benefits. Now, if I had an ID, a government-sanctioned ID, that would say that this is a person, and all those governance systems were hooked up, whether it be the DVLA, whether it be the NHS, whether it be the Department of Work and Pensions, etc. you could, from an administration perspective, you could see actually this person is being genuine in terms of what they're doing and what they're asking for. We know where he lives, or he or she lives, and we know that they've been to use this NHS service, and their kids are in school, wherever it may be.
Yeah, well, I mean, okay, so you've presented a lot of points here. And the first point that I will say is that digital ID, the whole point of digital ID is that it's not an e-passport or something, right? I mean, we've already got ID, we already have identification, we already have passports, and we have driving licenses. This is not just a digital version of that. This is a completely separate ID that will be government mandated. So it's not a private digital ID. It is the government. It is the state that is issuing this identification. You talk about illegal migrants. Well, they could just show a passport, they could show a driving license, and they clearly don't have that documentation. So we already know who they are. Well, we don't know who they are. The whole point is we know that they're not meant to be here. And if they do interact with the system at that point, but we know that many of them do operate in the shadow economy. So digital ID is not going to be solving that, because we already have identification. This is not about ID, because we already have passports and we have driving licenses. And you talked about the fact that it's going to make life a lot easier. And this is the thing. This is how they push it, because convenience is always. We've driven the whole point of moving forward. Apparently, the whole point of progress, supposedly, is convenience. It's the fact that, we're now living in a world where you can tap a few buttons on your phone and you can get an Uber Eats delivery in 10 minutes. So we're used to convenience, and we're used to sacrificing a lot of our freedom for convenience. So I think that the government are able to easily market this as a convenience thing. But the problem is that convenience does not mean that you should let the government take control of your life. And I don't think people are understanding that digital ID, because it's government mandated, will be linked to your social media platforms, for example. So the reason why the under 16 social media ban is being pushed is that it's not an under 16 social media ban. It's a ban for all of us, unless you prove that you're over 16. The way that you prove that you're over 16 is to link your ID to your social media platform. Once you've linked your ID to your social media platform, that's it. That is the end of anonymous posting. I mean, we see so many kind of anonymous anon accounts, but we're not going to be seeing that anymore. And a lot of people, they don't feel that they can speak freely with their government ID kind of looming over them. And we're seeing this digital ID coupled with the fact that London is the most heavily surveyed city in the world outside of China. So we're seeing that digital ID linked to live facial recognition cameras. And we're seeing the fact that it's going to be linked to your credit card, which would mean that hypothetically, you post a hurty little tweet online, and we already know that the UK arrests the most number of people for social media posts in the world. So you post something hurty online, the police don't have to actually do anything to find you because your ID is already linked to your account. Now, instead of calling you up for a voluntary police interview, voluntary in quotation marks, they can just freeze your bank account. So that's it. You're now unable to spend money online, and you've basically been locked out. You're basically in prison. You're in digital prison, and they can do that all within the click of a button. And that should scare people, because you might not think that the government now is going to be doing anything, but the fact is that governments change, that politicians change, that people change, and we can't always assume that it's going to be the best person with the best intention in power. And we could clearly see that with how Weimar Germany was being run, and then we saw the shift when Hitler came into power, using those exact same legislations that Weimar Germany had laid out.
I think you articulated that perfectly, Samiksha. Yeah, awesome. I agree fully. I think the biggest danger is linking digital IDs to digital money, which obviously we're all kind of really au fait with. The the use of cash has been trying to be phased out for
Exactly.
many years.
They're saying, the government is now saying that digital ID is not going to be compulsory, but we saw that with cash, right? I mean, I go to shops and now I'm not able to use cash because they tell me that we only accept cards, and it's going to be the exact same when it comes to digital ID. So yes, it will be effectively compulsory.
Okay. Well, let's not get too doomerism about it. That's isn't it? So looking ahead, where do you see the world in the next, say, 20 years, 2045? What does the world look like, according to Samiksha?
Well, I mean, I'm going to stay optimistic. I'm going to hope that there is a world where, I mean, this is in 20 years, where Zoomers have grown up and hopefully they've started paying taxes properly and they aren't living off the welfare system, and so they're waking up to the fact that Marxism is not a coherent ideology. I sincerely hope that we are living in a world where, well, in my ideal world, we would have a limited government doing the bare minimum, but doing the bare minimum well. So, for example, controlling immigration well. That would be a priority for me, and that's what I hope is going to happen. Do I think it's going to happen? I'm not quite sure. Looking at the way that the civil service acts when a new political party comes into power, I don't think I'm not going to be a doomer about it, but I think it's going to be very difficult for any politician or any political party that wants to come into power and wants to change things, because I think that I just think it's going to be incredibly hard, and I hope that my prayers are with whoever wants to actually make those changes in the country when it comes to the political system. I will stay outside of the political party system and attempt to make a change from there.
Yeah, and if you do ever enter, wear a bulletproof vest, I think. Well, I think it's been an amazing conversation. It's basically very, very articulate and a deep breadth of knowledge. It's hugely impressive. But if our audience wanted to learn a little bit more about you and your work, where's the best place they can follow you?
Yeah, so if you can Google Samiksha's State of the Debate. On X, I'm just Samiksha's SOTD. On YouTube and Instagram, it's Samiksha's State of the Debate.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure we'll link to that all in the podcast description. But Samiksha, thank you for appearing on the Dear Me podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.